All right, you guys, we made it through the no calculator part, so let's get those calculators out and start solving question 3. Question 3 starts us with, it's not, I don't consider it too difficult in the sense of like the algebra isn't too lengthy, memorizing unit circle, gone, don't need to worry about it. In fact, we will be giving you the Pythagorean identities, all those types of equations, so it makes things pretty easy. The first step I would like you to do, though, is because it's asking for us to find the remaining 5 trig functions, it's easiest because you're going to have all this work shown in the middle of your screen, all over the place, and you're going to have 5 answers you need to box in. So the easiest thing to do is start with just kind of like an answer key box. So, and I'll do this as like secant of t equals, probably do sine next. Now the order does not matter of these in your list. Sometimes it's just, I don't know, after doing it this many times, you kind of get the hang of kind of knowing the order in which you're going to solve it. That's the only reason I will have them in this order, is I do believe that's the order that we will end up solving it. But as you get started then, always, the first thing to do, just to give yourself a little confidence boost, make you feel like you know what you're doing, is to, picking of those 5, pick the reciprocal of cosine. So solving cosine t being given, you solve secant first, because all you have to do is say that secant of t is just 1 over 0.2841. So I'm going to clear out that. 1 divided by 0.2. And yes, I do know that I did not put a negative sign, but all that means is my answer will eventually be negative. So my answer will be 3.5199. So secant is negative 3.5199. Now, I did not bring this up at the very beginning, but this note here about pi less than t less than 3 pi over 2 t just simply is going to affect, I actually save the application of this bit of information till the very end. So I'll solve all these numbers, and because cosine was negative, secant will also be negative here. But we do need to go through the rest of our answers and check that in this quadrant, so this pi to 3 pi over 2 being quadrant 3 may also affect, say, sine might be negative or tangent might be negative. So we will go through and just, I look at the magnitudes of the numbers first, and then I will go back and at the very end make sure that I add negative signs for any of the trig values that are negative in the given quadrant. So we have cosine given. We found secant because we took the reciprocal. Next up, and you have a few options because you know cosine, you know secant. Technically, yes, then that means you can use like the Pythagorean identity that involves sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, or there's one about secant and tangent. But personally, I'm going to use the sine squared cosine squared one just because I think it's easier, and in the end, it gets us the other 4 even faster, I think. So what we're going to do, and maybe I'll change that color just briefly. So now I'm going to say sine squared. And by the way, that looks like that. It's sine squared and then the value plus the cosine, so negative 0.2 squared equals 1. So sine squared plus cosine squared, where cosine has been given. So sine squared and this is where I had some, actually a lot of kids having trouble with this. So let me go in here and I'll show you what happens. So I'm trying to take the negative 0.2841 squared. Now, I don't know what that number is going to come out to be, but I do know that when I hit enter, I should not be getting a negative number. A negative number squared should not be giving me a negative answer. So there's a couple things to do with that. The first thing is, even though you're using calculators and you've got this little safety net, this tool, you should still be checking for common sense errors like, why do I have a negative number after squaring this number? So that should be the first thing, is noting that you're checking that. But to eliminate that, you can just say, oh, okay, well that's my number. I just need to like take it times -1, right? Like that's one way to do it. But to eliminate that from being a problem, there's two ways. The first is, as I enter this problem, I don't have to put -0.2841. I can just say 0.2841 squared, because in my head, I know that I'm going to get a positive value. So to eliminate that from even happening, I can do that. The most proper and official way to do this is to put a parentheses -0.2841 in parentheses, then take the squared. And then your calculator will do the order of operations correctly. So no matter what, we want to make sure we get that positive number. Now, when we look at this, we need to take 1 minus that number squared. So I need 1 minus 0.2841 squared. And if you think about 1 minus the 0.0807, that's that number. So that's sine squared. So now I need to take the square root of this number, 0.9588, because sine squared was equal to 0.9193. If we take the square root, we get sine of t 0.98 something, maybe. 9588. Dang it, that's close. Okay, so sine is 0.9. Well, we know sine has to be between -1 and 1, so that checks out. Well, so now we have sine. We're just going to take cosecant, right? Because all we need to do there is say 1 over 0.9588. Now, one thing of caution, I'm going to tell you right now, cosecant is, now I can go in here and say 1 divided by 0.9588. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to round that number, right? Like 1.043, okay? Now, this may not make a big difference on this problem, but what I want to see people doing is, this is taking a rounded answer and getting a new answer. Like we're using a rounded answer to get another answer, and I really don't like that. And in some cases, it's a minimal error difference, but more often than not, it actually does make a big difference. So what I'd like to do is show then 1 divided by, and then I'm going to use my arrow. Now, even though the computer is only showing this number of decimal digits, it is actually still the exact value. Like in the computer, it's got more values, it's just not displaying them. So, but my point being, it's going to divide by that old answer. And fortunately for us, if you look at that, the numbers match 04297, but immediately, like, look at how much of a difference that is after the 7, 70 to 761. So it is something noteworthy, I think, that any chance we can not use rounded numbers to get more answers, I would encourage that. But in this case, I'm going to put 1.043. And so far I'm on track on the the answers in the order of which I put them in the answer key. But again, that doesn't matter. If you had a different order, you don't have to use the order of your answer key box to solve. So going back, let's use this color. The last ones are tangent, cotangent, and what we know about tangent is that it is just sine over cosine. Well, fortunately for us, we have those values. We have sine and cosine, where that's 0.9588 and cosine negative 0.241. So I'm going to be able to use those two numbers when I divide that. Let's see, my tangent value, 3.3748. And then cotan is 1 over 3748. And that's 0.2963. With that said, again, I need to be careful that I go back, check my work actually, make sure everything's right there, but I need to go back. Okay, quadrant 3. Well, my tangent is positive in quadrants 1 and 3. So those values, I'm going to leave those two alone. But that worked out. I did leave some information out. See how I had a positive 9588 and a negative cosine? Well, that's because looking back, I could have told you right now that number 9588, that's the sine value. The sine has to be negative in my answer key, also creating a cosecant of negative. But the reason sine's negative is we're in quadrant 3, and that's the y value. Y value in 3 is negative. So your sine value is negative 0.9588, creating a cosecant of negative 1.043. Your tangent values do stay positive, and we already had secant negative. So 12 minutes, but I got through technically 5 problems, even though it's all part of question 3. So I'll end there, and we will get question 4 and the rest in the next video.